Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley, and every week we bring you stories of entrepreneurship, education, and innovation, especially as they relate to service. Rotary is an organization all about service to others. Service above self is our motto, and we love being able to share stories that are inspiring in some interesting way. So, as we do every week, we get as many of our club members as who have time to join in on the actual recording, and then this becomes the program for a given week's meeting. I want to introduce to you the folks who are currently on the call. So, Chris, I'd like you to start out. Tell us about yourself.
I'm Chris Cochran. I am near Ottawa, Canada right now, and I'm the chair of PR and communications for the eClub of Silicon Valley. I'm also a television and film producer.
And a very good guy. Excellent, excellent. Roger, you're up.
Yes, I'm Roger Preston, and I'm from Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada, and which is in the opposite side of Canada to Chris. And I'm a retired lawyer, and I'm a fairly new member of the Rotary eClub.
And totally excellent to have you on the recording, Roger. Thanks. Nate, you're up.
All right, I'm Nate. I'm actually from almost as far east in Canada as you can get from Halifax. However, I've been living in Tokyo, Japan for about 17 years, 20 years in Japan itself. I'm a social studies teacher and an instructional technology coach at an international school, actually. So I'm very excited to hear Aaron's presentation because it sounds to me it's going to jive a lot with what I do on a daily basis at my school. So pleasure to meet you, Aaron. Thanks, Rustin.
Excellent. And kudos to Nate for joining from Tokyo, where it's, I think, about a little over 11 p.m. right now. Our president, Mitty Chang, looks like he's on the call from the set of faces that I'm looking at the moment. But he's not, because we're just in his account, but he's a good guy. So there you go. My name is Rushton Hurley. I'm the charter president of the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley, and I'm an educator as well. And so all the more fun to have Aaron come and speak to us today because he has some very cool things to talk to us about. Aaron's background is in education and in the corporate setting. And he is a part of an organization called the Eliad Group. And their idea is how we can make education properly allow our graduates to be prepared for the world in much more meaningful ways than perhaps traditional education has. He will give you far more details about that. And after a short presentation, about 15 minutes, we'll engage in a little Q&A. But Aaron, welcome. It is a pleasure to have you speaking to us.
Thank you so much, Rushton. I'm really happy to be joining you guys.
All right, and let's go ahead and launch your presentation.
Okay. Let's see here, we will share screen and present here. If the button will click, there we go.
Looks good.
Okay. And so, shall I launch in, or is there
You're good to go. Go ahead.
I'm good to go. Okay. Hello to all who are listening. I'm going to be speaking today about entrepreneurial learning, which is something that I've really focused on for much of my life during my own education in sort of hacking my own education. And then for the last decade or so, I've been working heavily in helping education figure out what it needs to look like to be truly preparing our youth for the future that they're entering and that we're entering now. One of the things I really like about looking at education through this lens of entrepreneurial learning is that I think it helps us really see the limitations of the current system that we're in and what needs to change for a truly future-ready education. I want to point out that this is, it's what I'm talking about is different than sort of an entrepreneur class. And I'll talk more about how that relates to how education often interprets the ideas that are brought to it. It's really kind of being entrepreneurial about everything that we do and figuring out how to weave that into our education system. I'm basing this on when I talk about entrepreneurial education, people often think I'm talking about teaching business and how to be an entrepreneur. And that certainly is a subject I recommend people study and an experience people explore. But what I'm really talking about is becoming entrepreneurial about everything that we do and helping people understand how to begin to think and act like an entrepreneur in everything that they're attempting. I think that we talk about sort of providing an education, and I don't think we should be providing education anymore. I think we need to help people really undertake their own education, which is, I think, the only way to really build the skills that people need to have. And I'm using the word entrepreneurial because the root for that word, entreprendre, from the French, really means to undertake. And so we'll talk more about that distinction in a moment. I think one of the reasons I think this is such a great entry into education and looking at how to change it is, I think we're really at an inflection point in really in human history and how education sits within that. And for those that are not math aficionados, an inflection point is when the curvature of a line changes from one arc to another. And when you're on a path, it really signals a large change in direction. I think that's what I think sort of is beginning to happen in education. And I think certainly needs to. But before we go into that, a little bit of history. And looking at a bit of the system that we have currently. So the system we currently have was really started about 300 years ago. And we talk about it as traditional education, but I think conventional is a more accurate way to describe it. It's actually quite a radical departure from the way that humans have learned throughout much of human history. The education system we have was built for a world that we are really transitioning out of. It was a short phase in human history. It was an industrial age and an agrarian age. It was an age of information scarcity. It was a world of lifelong careers when we needed people to know just enough and be really good at following directions over and over again in repeated tasks. And it was actually a world that relied quite heavily on child labor. And as that education system evolved and became really what we see today, was when mechanization in agriculture and industry had started to make it so that children weren't as needed anymore for labor. And so we needed a place to occupy, really, children and socialize them and get them ready for the work that they were going to be endeavoring towards later in their lives. And quite cynically, I kind of talk about it or think about it as it was really designed to kind of turn these humans into these, to give people, to help them sort of store and retrieve information. And unfortunately, and to follow directions. And unfortunately, robots are so much better at that now that we're really using a form of training that we're training for the wrong things now. We have a world of abundant information now, and a strong need for creative thought and an ability to learn new things, less a need for repeating known steps to known solutions. So moving on to the system that we need education that prepares us for this world. This is a graph of population growth over the last 10,000 years, but really the pace of change kind of mimics this or follows this pattern of just incredible rise very recently in the pace of change. Forrester Research predicts that artificial intelligence will replace 7% of US jobs by 2025. Intuit analysis expects that 40% of America's workforce will be freelance by 2020. Thomas Frey and others predict that 2 billion jobs will disappear by 2030 because of artificial intelligence and robotics. And this is not just blue collar jobs. We have an incredibly, just in the last year, indications of the true impact of what's coming. Here we have, looking at IBM's Watson, recommends the same treatment as doctors in 99% of cancer cases. I saw some news this morning even that was very stark in this area. Reshoring. So even the jobs that were sent to India and other places from the US are starting to be reshored back to the US, but not for humans to do that work anymore, for robotic processes. So the world that we're looking at is, the skills that are needed are being talked about by quite a number of people, Dan Pink among them, Tony Wagner out of Harvard, Sir Ken Robinson, many people talking about the skills that we will need. The ones that I think we really need to be preparing for, helping people understand how to find needs and design creative solutions, innovative solutions to meet those needs. We need people that can manage complex endeavors, who can identify what they don't know, learn it, or find someone who knows it and convince them to join their quest. And we need people who know how to create meaning for themselves and for others. And so really we need people, we need our education system to kind of make this big turn in this inflection point away from kind of trying to turn humans into robots and really start to augment the humanness that we have innately as part of who we are. So we've had, waves of reform throughout education in the 19th and 20th centuries. And each one of these was supposed to have these big changes for us. We had obviously technology, which was supposed to just absolutely revolutionize education. I think has been, one of the most disappointing for all its power. We just have not figured out how to use it properly, and I'll say more about that. We've come up with different ways of teaching math, back and forth to all these different ways. We've come up with things like project-based learning, all of which can potentially be very good for what we need moving forward. But what were the results that we've gotten and that we're still getting? So, we're finding there's a lot more research coming out on this, that we're getting a decline in resiliency. We're having people that are afraid to take risks. They're needing constant direction. There's a strong lacking in the 3 C's of communication, creativity, and critical thinking. And I would add another C to that actually, which is commitment, which really speaks to purpose and internally derived source of meaning, which we just are not getting out of the education system that we have. So why are we getting these results? We have, an emergent future that really requires a different way of looking at things. So we have an age now of an information abundance, an increasing pace of change, where organizations are much more about purpose and less about command and control. And we have a learn more than we have a need to know. So, unfortunately, we're still doubling down, it seems, especially in the United States, on an information retention and regurgitation model of education. We're looking at places like Shanghai and South Korea and Singapore that get very good scores on information retention and regurgitation measures. But those countries are recognizing that that's not the future of education. And it's kind of ironic that they are actually looking, ministries in those countries are looking at our education research and trying to find how they can move their education systems into more of a creativity and innovation-based preparation. There's a quote I love from Yang Zhao, who's a education researcher, that he talks about these ministers from these countries and places are asking him, how the U.S. teaches innovation. They want to know how to do that, and he says, "Look, the U.S. does not teach innovation. It's just not as good at killing it as your systems are." So what we've seen is that we have all of these wonderful ideas coming to education, STEM, project-based learning, technology. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and entrepreneurship. And we bring these to education. And the problem that's happening, the reason we're still getting the results that we're getting, to my mind, is that we're filtering these really good ideas and these real world things through a system that is really based on these old orthodoxies or these old assumptions or these old paradigms. I haven't found which of these words works for everyone yet, so I kind of put them all in there. But really, it's a system of beliefs about what education is and what it's for. And the conventional system that we're using really has a focus on information as the idea of what it's supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be transferring information. And so if we look at, for instance, often we're interpreting things like entrepreneurship and teaching it as an information-based thing instead of an experiential thing. We have, if you say, we should be teaching creativity, unfortunately, we start to think about teaching it in ways that are information-based. Another of these orthodoxies is that we think of teachers as experts in areas of information instead of as experts in how to learn and how to engage with the world, which is a shift that I think we need to make. Another big one is that we're basing our education system on an accountability model of a command and control structure of I know what you need and you need to do it, often accompanied by really the idea of or else. So we're using coercion in our education system. And I think that that's just the wrong ownership model. The new economy is purpose-driven, and we can't be taking people through a system of command and control and extrinsic motivation. We have, it looks here like she's doing thumbs up, but she's actually pointing a finger of, like, you do what I tell you or else. So what I'm really coming to understand is that I think that all learning is experiential. We talk about experiential learning as this important thing, but I really think that all learning is experiential. And even this, classroom from the 1800s, which is not that much different than we're doing it today, is full of experiential learning. And I think, unfortunately, that the lessons that are really strongly being learned through the system are how to follow directions, how to submit, which I think is the unhealthy response to loss of autonomy, or to rebel, how to memorize and regurgitate, how to relinquish your own interests in service of other people's, how not to fail, how to avoid failure at all costs, and unfortunately, how to use power, not influence, to get what it is that we want out of our world. This is one of my favorite quotes that I think illustrates this very well, which is that we ask 18-year-olds to make huge decisions about their career and financial future when a month ago they had to ask to go to the bathroom. So how we can expect people to come out of that system and be totally different than we've been asking them to behave for 18 years, I think is crazy. So what does work? I think we have to rethink the foundation of what we're building education on. And this is where entrepreneurial learning comes in. We need to be building our system on in ways that help people think critically and creatively, that to help them communicate clearly, to learn and unlearn constantly, and to develop resilience, internal drive, and emotional intelligence. So again, I think it's just so very clearly not about the topic. And if we're talking about entrepreneurism, it's really a different how. So how is it different? There's really, it shows up differently depending on where we're looking at it. And I'll talk more about entrepreneurial learning. There's entrepreneurial learning in existing structures of timetables and siloed information areas. And then there are new structures that I think we need to be looking at. But it's very difficult to have, a timetable that's full of these experiential learning bits, and then to just throw a class in here or there that is expecting people to behave in a totally different way than they're normally engaging with the world, which is why, for instance, entrepreneurship classes are not really the way to go about it. We have to really rethink, I think, the foundations of what we're doing. So I'd like to share here a couple of programs that I've developed that are really built on different ways of thinking about engaging. This is a program I started in Bali, Indonesia, that is called Leap Academy, and I'm working with other schools to build this within theirs. The point here is to in this case, this is a case of a different structure. We can, I think, even given, if we jump back to these other structures of timetables and different subject silos, we can engage with those differently than we are if we think about using a model of assistive accountability, for instance, where instead of do what I tell you or else because I know what you need, we move to what are your goals and how can I help you? So really helping students become designers of their own learning. Where we really get at entrepreneurial learning, though, is when we dissolve those structures and really engage with the internal goals of the people involved and support them in that. So in this program, Leap Academy, we did just that. So this program stands for Lean, Entrepreneurial, Action-Based, and Product-Oriented. And it's really what we do in that program really comes from looking at why each of the individuals are there. And then we use a different how of engaging based on those areas I spoke of previously. So we spend about half of our time we're in small teams working in what we call group endeavor on real problems in the real world. We're solving actual problems with community partners out in the real world. And here's some examples of students out doing projects in the real world in Bali. Around waste was our focus this year. And then we spent about half our time working in solo endeavor. And the students are setting their own goals for what it is that they want to get out of the program. And anything they're not getting out of the group endeavor when we're working on these real world problems, they design their own schedule and their own classes, and they learn what they need to learn to meet the goals that they have. If it's getting into college or going to engineering school, it might be, I want to get through calculus. And then our response to them is, well, how are you going to do that? And how can we help? Another program that I've done is called I Lead in Design, and it's going to its 5th year, actually. And in this program, this is a very intensive program based on, it's a design thinking model, also working with real problems in the real world. It's a little more structured in walking people through the design process. This is an example of a team of students that worked with a local museum to help them rethink some of their exhibits to make them more kind of meaningful to teenagers, to kind of get that population in there more. And one of the things that we're doing in my group is really helping schools think about how to not, kids are often doing this kind of engagement with the world as extras from school. They're doing this as clubs or after school or on weekends or in summer programs. And what we're working with schools on is how do you replace school I'll jump back to the Leap Academy slide here. How do you replace school with something that is helping build the skills that are needed and having impact on the real world now, rather than having that be something that's always extra? So what we do in these programs is we map what we're doing to traditional ways of interpreting endeavor into subjects and grades, et cetera. But what we're really doing is we're engaging with the world in a way that I think is building the skills that we need to have. So I think that in summary, I think it's really important to stop thinking about changes in education as changes in subjects or areas of study, and thinking about it as a different way of engaging with or relating to whose learning it is, the relationship between teacher and student, and the relationship between school and the rest of the world. And that is the work that we're focusing on in my group. And I think that we're starting to see more and more schools wanting to do this and just not really knowing how or what it looks like. And that's the work that we do with them. So I think I'm out of time. I might even be a little beyond it. I apologize if so.
All right. Well, excellent information for sure. And we still do have a couple of minutes. So if we,
okay.
What we should do is what I'd like for the folks who are on the call to be able to ask a question each. And so, Nate, would you like to start us off with a question for Aaron?
Yeah. First, Aaron, thank you. That was ridiculously interesting. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Good.
I'm a teacher. How could I not?
Right.
But still, it was great. And my question is kind of related to how you set your programs up with the schools. So do you go in for like a summer program, or do you have like a week where you go in? The students seem to think that you're talking about Bali, and when I was looking at that, came into my head, Bali International School students maybe, or kids in from Jakarta flew in or something.
So that was at a place called Green School. I was there for a year and a half. And so we did a couple things there. So actually I can give you both examples of two different ways of doing this with schools. One is that we ran the iLead in Design program, which is the intensive design thinking based program there, for the entire high school over a 3-week period. So they took kind of a J term or a time between a couple of terms. And we did this for 3 weeks solid, 6 hours a day, working in small teams. We actually had 11 teams, including some graduate students from Hong Kong at the design school at Hong Kong Polytech, and mixing with the high school kids. Finding a spot kind of in the program for 2 to 3 weeks is ideal. And what happens then is you bring teachers in as coaches as well. And what you're doing is you're helping a school see what it can be like when you're doing what I call concentrated endeavor, which is when you're working on intensive problems and really engaging with them in that way. They get to feel the difference. The other program, which was Leap Academy, that actually is fully a replacement for school. And so I'm actually just ended a 6-week program with in a 7th grade class here in Monterey, California, in an international baccalaureate and IB school. And in that one, what we're doing is we're really recommending to schools at all levels. What we're seeing is that schools are, the mistake they're making is they're trying to figure out how to make changes in their program that apply to everything all at once. And so they say, that's why you see like, hey, let's add an entrepreneurship class and it's twice a week, but it's just a little drop in the bucket compared to everything else that's going on. And what we say is, look, if you really want to get disruptive change and really see what can be different in education, stop thinking about putting a veneer or a layer on top of everything else, which is just a small percentage of people's week, and think about condensing that time and doing what we call an anomalous space, which is that take people out of your regular program and build a little school within a school that people can rotate in and out of. So when they're engaging with this, including teachers and students, it's full time and it's built from the ground up based on the kind of learning you want to be doing. And then you can see what's really possible. And then you can use that as a kernel of kind of change that has ripple effects through the whole program. At Green School currently, actually, the LEAP Academy program is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is to begin to consume the resources of the rest of the school. If it's proof of concept that people like, more people want in. So you have more students and teachers join, it gets a little bigger. We started it in the high school, and it's now actually next year is going to start to move down to middle school and primary.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's how we're doing.
Yeah, it's innovative. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderfully cool stuff. Roger or Chris, are you ready to kick in with comment?
Yeah, I have a question. Actually, two questions. I'm an old guy. Okay. I grew up in the traditional system. You sit at the desk, you learn, you do your homework, the whole bit. How do you get buy-in from people like me that maybe parents have gone through this particular system, and now their son, daughter, whomever is going to a system that you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And the second part of that, which may be part of this, is how do you measure results? How do you tell parents, others, that, okay, your kid's actually progressing. He's doing, he's okay. The things are going to be good.
No, it's a great point. So how do you convince other people to do it? It's actually, you got to show them. You get people. And so that's, I spent years and years and years just having conversations. And the problem is the words we're using all have different meanings to all of us.
Yeah.
And so I basically I said, look, if you're interested at all, let's just do something. Let's build a space that is, the thing is, it has to be totally different than the regular space, because kids don't change like that. If they walk into one class that's entrepreneurship, they don't become entrepreneurs automatically. They're in a system of command and control and following directions. So I say, look, let's just do something. Come in and hang out in it. Feel what it's like to be engaging with the real world on problems, and see for yourself the difference between the engagement you get in people. And so I have had people who are just adamantly against the idea of this, and in fact feel threatened by it and think it's going to destroy the world. And then they come into it, and at the end of it, they go, oh, now I get it.
Okay.
And holy cow, how can we do more and more of this? So in terms of measuring results, I think that one of the things that we have to start doing is we have to start broadening our definition of success. So what we're finding is that the results we're measuring basically retention and regurgitation of information. What we're finding is that the broader set of skills that we're actually learning through this experiential education that all education is, the measurements we're getting out of there are reduced empathy and increased narcissism over the last 40 years, right? We are measuring an increase in bullying. So if you could design
Donald Trump.
Well, if you could design a system that would create bullying, you would put people in a situation where they're segregated by age, they lose their autonomy, and they have someone constantly exerting power over them with threats. And so what happens, the natural tendency of a person in that situation is to look for somebody else to do that to make them feel better about the position that they're in. So we're measuring lots of stuff that's really, really scary. We have people graduating from top universities with top grades that really have been trained largely to follow directions. And I talk to people around the world that are hiring people, and they say, we get these people and they need constant management.
Yeah.
And so I think we're measuring lots. But when we think of school, we go back to measuring stuff that isn't quite the right stuff. So again, what we do for measuring here is, what are these kids doing in the world right now? Not what is the information they're retaining, but if they are out there solving real problems. I was just working with some kids, and they're getting restaurants to stop serving plastic straws automatically. because when they only serve plastic straws on request, they end up reducing the number of straws they use by like 80 or 90%. So, you know, these kids are going out there and having conversations with restaurants, convincing them to change their behavior. Those kids cannot not be learning really important stuff if they are able to do that. So it's performance-based assessments. And, you know, if a kid wants to learn math to a certain level, we can teach them that math to the point where they can regurgitate that very well and forget it later, which is what happens, without teaching them or having them gain the experience of how to set their own goals and meet them, or all of these other really important skills, or how to design their own learning, how to set a goal and how to meet it. But we can't design a learning environment where people are learning how to set their goals and meet them. They're learning how to communicate really well. They're learning how to have high emotional intelligence and all these things. We can't design environments where they're learning that stuff without them also learning information, because you have to have stuff that you're processing and doing when you're practicing those skills. Unfortunately, I think school's done a very good job of teaching information without all those important skills. I use the example of a hammer. You can know what a hammer is without knowing how to use it. You can look at it, you can fill in a bubble on a multiple choice test and say, that is a hammer. But I can't take someone to a construction site and help them learn how to build a house and then have them not know what a hammer is. But I can have them know what a hammer is and not know how to use it.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. I mean, as a film producer, I've hired many people, young people, middle-aged people, so on, and most are totally useless until we take them through the training we want them to have. And the ones I like to hire are the ones who can think for themselves. Unfortunately, you find out the hard way whether they really can or not.
Yeah,
it sounds like your system may give them these skills ahead of time, so that when employers like myself go to hire, I can pretty much count on the person in front of me being able to handle some kind of problem or situation without myself or somebody else babysitting them. That sounds really good. I'm all for this, 1,000%.
So
yeah, that's the entire point of it, exactly.
Yeah.
I'd like to see, Roger, do you have a comment or question?
Oh, you're muted, Roger. There you go.
Okay. A couple comments. First of all, what I've noticed over the last 30 years in Canada, anyway, there's been a lot of experimentation in education. And it seems that they always seem to come up with these ideas, but when you look at the results, it seems that the system's getting worse rather than better because of the results that we're getting. The other comment that I'm seeing is that it's not fair, I don't think, or appropriate to look at our system today and compare it to what it was 60 years ago. What's happened is we've had a huge movement into the cities from the country. And if you lived in the countryside, and particularly on a small farm, then you learn to problem solve as part of your life, because there was all these different tasks that you had to do, and you had to learn how to do them in the most appropriate way.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that has always amazed me is that I can remember a fellow classmate of myself hiring a plumber to change a float bulb on a toilet, which was part and parcel of my experience, which I had to do when I was at home. And you learn from your parents, and you learn that problem-solving skill. But he had absolutely no idea of how to do that or what it was involved.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Roger. You know, one of the things that we find is that I think it actually is appropriate to compare the education to 60 years ago. The problem is that we have so much more of it now. 60 years ago, we had free play and responsibility in our lives, which I think inoculated us against the dangers and damage that education was doing. Because we were still learning the lessons of following other people's directions, doing what we're told, not thinking for ourselves, etc. But we had all this time when we were running around our neighborhoods doing exactly those things, thinking for ourselves, negotiating the rules of the game with other kids, learning where our boundaries were, doing things for ourselves, fixing things that were broken. So we actually got, humans evolved to learn through play, quite frankly. Through all of our youth, we learned how to be humans and how to negotiate and imagine and be creative through play. The problem is, we said, look, the world's getting crazily busy, it's getting complicated, etc. We must need more education. And so we said, let's test more on these very basic things. Let's spend more time in the classroom. And to do that, the kids are going crazy. So we have to be more authoritarian. And that's going to get us what we need. What we're actually seeing is a decline in all of the stuff we want because of more education. And if we think about the fact that the skills we really acquired that we needed, we got out of school, and figure out how to make school bring those characteristics into it, then we get the best of both worlds. An example is that we think that to get better test scores, we actually need more studying. And what they're finding is that, so schools have stopped PE, for instance, so that kids can cram more for the tests. What they found is that schools that went back to doubling their recess times and having actually fitness and PE as part of what they're doing in a very focused way, actually started getting better test scores. So the obvious answer that people come to with No Child Left Behind and all of this was more command and control, more studying and regurgitation. When it turns out that to get the stuff we want, it's actually the opposite of that. It's more about internal goals and engaging with the real world through responsibility, not through accountability to myself, not through accountability to somebody else. So I think your comments are very apropos.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I want to wind us down because, and actually, I want to apologize to our viewers. We've gone way over, but I want to give Aaron the chance to comment on one more thing, and then we'll complete it. Clearly, a system that is built more on initiative than, say, compliance can be really, really powerful for those who haven't been successful in the conventional system. And so I'm interested to know, like, what you may be involved with that allows kids who are in under-resourced areas to get the chance to do some of the things you've described.
Yeah. So, the thing that's really great about kind of entrepreneurial learning, where they are setting a goal for themselves and meeting it with our help, is it actually works great for people that don't do traditionally well in traditional or conventional schools. And it works really well for those that do. So that's one thing that's great, I think, about it. What we find is that a lot of people that are underserved is that they, when they find that they actually have some say in what's happening, and that they have skills to add value to their communities now, that they re-engage, because often that's an area of disengagement because they don't see the system being able to give them what they need. My I Lead in Design program is expanding to Salinas, California from Monterey this year. We're going to be doing it in both places. And it's going to be done largely with local populations there. And we're really excited about engaging with that very high scholarship base there. Also seeing a wonderful program that a colleague and friend runs is with women who are freshly out of the criminal justice system. They engage with them in solving real problems in their communities. And these women have an incredibly low recidivism rate after they go through this program And what they say is that, I never realized I had the ability to add value to my world. And that when they understand that they're able to do that, it changes their whole outlook and their whole engagement with the community.
Very, very cool stuff. I can imagine Rotary clubs in Salinas or other places being like, "Hey, how do we support these kinds of things?" Because that's exactly in line with what Rotary hopes for the world in terms of making the world a better place.
Yeah, wonderful.
I should finish this up, and Aaron, I'll give you the last word in just a moment. But all of you who are watching, please let us know you were here. So do the attendance survey if you are one of our club members. If you're not, please do it and add your email address spelled correctly so that you'll get that email you can pass along to your club secretary as a makeup meeting. And then everybody, we ask that you leave a comment in the discuss, DISQUS section at the bottom of the page. That's a chance not just to reply to Aaron, but also a way to reply to other people who've added comments. And that is one of the ways that we interact in the eClub of Silicon Valley. So with that, let me pass it over to Aaron. And Aaron, go ahead and finish us off.
Sure. Thanks so much, everyone. So I guess two things I would just reiterate in terms of thinking about how to move education forward. One is that if we think about, instead of changing the what's of education, like we should study this instead of that, we need to think of it more as a how, because it's about how we relate to each other and how we relate to our world, which really enhances our humanness. And the people that are going to have jobs in the future are going to be people who are very human, not who are really good at emulating a robot. And the other piece is that the best way to do that is to begin to learn by adding value to the real world now. So doing service, for instance, with youth, with people who are advanced doers and collaborators and thinkers, so that they can see what it's like for an advanced thinker to learn, an advanced learner to learn. So adding value to the world in apprenticeship with others who are already advanced in their abilities to add value to the world now really helps transform what education produces for us.
Excellent. Everybody, we will see you next week.